The scorching August sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete courtyard of the New York County Supreme Court. I stood motionless on the steps. In my hands, I held the final dissolution of marriage, bearing the court's official embossed seal. The thin piece of paper felt weightless, yet it contained the 5 years of my blind youth. The printer ink still gave off a sharp chemical scent. I carefully traced my finger over the lines where my name and the name of the man with whom I had shared my bed were written: Eleanor Prescott and Anthony Miller. From this moment on, those two names officially belonged to complete strangers, or, more accurately, to sworn enemies. 5 years ago, I was the beloved daughter of the chairman of the board of Prescott Holdings, blinded by love. Against my family's wishes, I had a tearful, shouting match with my father in his study, swearing that Anthony was a good man, that he was ambitious and just needed a springboard to truly shine. My father had looked at me then with a mixture of pain and helplessness. He sighed, and it seemed as if more gray had appeared in his hair. In the end, out of love for his only daughter who had lost her mother early, he turned a blind eye to everything and nodded. He allowed Anthony to enter our wealthy family, asking for nothing in return. But how was I to know that my father's heavy nod would be the beginning of a tragedy, one in which we would be used and bled dry? The sound of footsteps on the stone tiles broke my train of thought. Anthony emerged from the corridor. He was wearing a custom-tailored suit from Italy, my gift for his last birthday, which had cost as much as an ordinary person earns in a year. His hair was perfectly styled, and his face wore an undisguised look of smug satisfaction. On his arm was Christina, his young mistress, in a tight, bright red dress, clutching a designer handbag purchased with my joint credit card. They walked side by side, looking not like people who had just experienced the collapse of a marriage, but rather like those who had just won the lottery. Well, this was it. Now our paths diverge. Don't hold it against me. The feelings have cooled. We just set each other free, Anthony said coldly, his lips twisting into a smirk. I looked up at the man before me. The straight nose, the clear eyes, the appearance of an intelligent and modest young man that had once deceived my youth. Now, a soul-chilling audacity shone through it. My throat was dry, but I didn't cry. My tears had run dry during those sleepless nights waiting for my husband, during the times I caught him in syrupy text exchanges with dozens of other girls. Christina pressed herself against Anthony's shoulder, and her shrill voice echoed across the sun-drenched courtyard. Eleanor, Anthony is right. You have money and status, but you have no idea how to keep a man. Men need a woman who is soft and obedient, not a high and mighty princess. Go back home, keep your trust fund warm, and live alone. I calmly placed the document in my purse, snapping the lock shut with a sharp click. Looking directly into Christina's eyes, I replied in the calmest tone I could muster. You picked up the trash I threw out and think you've found gold. Keep him. Enjoy. Just be careful. Anthony's face darkened. He took a step forward and hissed through his teeth. Don't be so confident. Do you think your family's corporation is still intact? You sat at home for years playing house. Do you know who runs the show at the company now? Your old man has lost his mind. My CEO position, plus the trusted people my mother so carefully placed in all the key departments. Do you think just by divorcing me you can kick us out? The tree has put down deep roots. If you try to pull it out, you'll bring down the whole business. Anthony laughed loudly. His laughter echoed off the walls of the courthouse. He was blindly confident. He sincerely believed that for the last 5 years, I had turned a blind eye to how he built a network of his relatives and cronies, placing them in key positions like procurement, finance, and project management out of my foolishness and blind love. His mother, Catherine, a woman from a blue-collar background, always pretended to be kind and simple in front of me, but behind my back, she secretly conspired with shell companies to siphon money from Prescott Holdings. They thought I was blind, that I was deaf. They mistook my silence for weakness. They were about to learn how wrong they were. We'll see just how deep your roots have grown. I turned and walked away without a single glance back. The sun shone directly in my eyes, blindingly, but everything had become crystal clear. It was time to clean out the trash I had let into my own home. It was time for the wayward daughter to return to her father and confess. I got behind the wheel of my familiar SUV, closing the windows tightly to completely block out the city noise. It was so quiet in the car that I could clearly hear my own heartbeat. Opening my phone, I swiped through the thousands of photos in the gallery. Lavish wedding photos from Europe, pictures of Anthony tenderly feeding me with a spoon when I was sick, family snapshots in the mansion filled with furniture I had bought with my own money. All of this had once been a treasure I cherished. Without the slightest hesitation, I pressed Delete. Everything. The system asked for final confirmation. I gave a bitter smile and confirmed. The screen flickered, and more than 5,000 moments of lies vanished without a trace. It was like removing a malignant tumor. Cutting it out hurts to the core, but if you don't, it will metastasize and kill you. I found the familiar number saved as Dad. For the last 3 years, our conversations could be counted on one hand. Every time I called, he would ask a few perfunctory questions and then claim to be busy to hang up. I knew he was angry. Angry that I had been too protective of my husband's family, allowing them to wreak havoc on the company he had built with his blood, sweat, and tears. With trembling fingers, I took a deep breath and pressed call. 3 rings, and then someone picked up. A familiar deep cough came through the line, making my heart clench. Eleanor, my daughter. His voice was low, filled with an old man's weariness. Just those 2 words. The wall of pride and strength I had so carefully built all this time finally crumbled. Hot tears streamed from my eyes, rolling down my cheeks. Dad, I was wrong. I was so wrong. My voice broke, choked with sobs. There was a moment of silence on the other end. No reprimands, no phrases like, I told you so. Just a quiet, trembling sigh, a father's boundless comfort. I know the hearing is over. Cry, my daughter, let it all out. Dad is here. Our home is here. No one will dare to hurt you again. I buried my head in the steering wheel, sobbing like a small child. All the resentment, humiliation, and bitterness that had been building up for years poured out. I told him about Anthony's betrayal, about the audacity of Catherine's family, about how they planned to take over the company. My father listened to everything, only occasionally agreeing quietly. When I had calmed down a bit and wiped my tears, my father's voice suddenly turned to steel. In it resonated the authoritative tone of a chairman of the board, hardened by decades in ruthless business. Paul Prescott's daughter does not give up because of a bunch of nobodies. You've finished cleaning your house. Now it's time to clean up the company. I've long since gathered all the evidence of their fraud. I was just waiting for your approval. I didn't want you to be torn between love and duty. It turned out he knew everything. He was just waiting for my own awakening, my heart filled with immeasurable gratitude and remorse. I sat up straight, wiping the last tears from the corners of my eyes, my gaze fixed on the glass behemoth of the Prescott Holdings Business Center in the distance. My voice regained its icy firmness. Dad, today at exactly 2 p.m., I will personally arrive at the main office. Please have Arthur from Human Resources and Leonard from Security on standby. Before I enter the boardroom, all access to the corporate system for Anthony and his relatives must be blocked. Their elevator keycards must be deactivated. Good. I'll give the order immediately. Let them learn the price of their greed. My father hung up. I started the car. The engine roared to life. I turned the air conditioning to maximum, letting the cold air clear my mind completely. Anthony, you were right. The roots of your tree have grown very deep. But you forgot that I am the owner of this land. I won't be pulling out the roots. I will dig up the entire foundation and throw you off my territory. The cleanup operation had officially begun. At exactly 2:00 p.m., I stepped out of my car, parked in the VIP spot at the main entrance of the Prescott Holdings building. It had been a long time since I had appeared here in my capacity as the heiress. I was wearing a sharp, impeccably tailored black pantsuit. My hair was pulled back into a severe bun. My stiletto heels beat a crisp, confident rhythm on the gleaming granite floor. The receptionists and security guards in the lobby flinched and greeted me hastily. The air instantly became strangely quiet and tense. I headed straight for the executive elevator, using a top-level access card that had been collecting dust in my drawer for 5 years. The numbers on the digital display changed rapidly, whisking me to the 40th floor, where the boardroom was located. Through the double-paned, soundproof glass, I could already see what was happening inside. Catherine, Anthony's mother, was sprawled proprietorially in a leather armchair reserved exclusively for the vice president. Around her sat relatives who had been placed in the company and a couple of directors from her shell companies. She was wearing a garish red velvet dress and a pearl necklace, with pearls the size of quail eggs. She was laughing and chattering incessantly. I gave a signal to Arthur, the director of human resources, and the 6 security officers waiting outside, and then, with one hand, I forcefully pushed open the heavy oak door. The door swung open with a dry crack, instantly cutting off all laughter and chatter in the room. All eyes turned to the entrance. The smile on Catherine's face froze. She narrowed her eyes. Her expression changed from surprise to annoyed, and she spoke in a patronizing tone. Eleanor, what are you doing here during work hours? This is a meeting of senior management. You're interrupting the executives. If you need something, we can talk at home. She was still playing the role of the model mother-in-law, trying to scold me from the height of her imaginary position. I didn't honor her with a response. With a slow, commanding stride, I approached the head of the table and forcefully threw a thick folder of documents onto the glass surface. The sound made her relatives flinch. Catherine, you seem to have forgotten a basic rule. At home, you may have been my mother-in-law, but in this building, I am the daughter of Chairman Paul Prescott and the second largest shareholder of this corporation. And as of this morning, according to all legal documents, there are no ties between me and your son, I declared loudly, casting a razor-sharp gaze over the faces that were beginning to pale rapidly. Catherine jumped to her feet, her face turning crimson with rage. What are you talking about? A divorce? Anthony didn't tell me anything. So clever, aren't you? You think just because you have money, you can throw our family out on the street? Let me tell you something. Anthony has been running this company for the past few years. All the partnership contracts are in his hands. If you fire him, the firm will go bankrupt immediately. I sneered contemptuously, shaking my head at the stupidity of this greedy woman. Whether it goes bankrupt or not is no longer your concern. Arthur. Read the order. Arthur, the gray-haired HR director who had worked with my father since the very beginning, stepped forward solemnly. He cleared his throat, opened the folder, and began to enunciate each word. On the basis of the decision of the chairman of the board, and in light of evidence of financial misconduct and breaches of professional ethics, the Human Resources Department officially announces the immediate termination of Mr. Anthony Miller, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Samuel Miller, Head of Procurement, Miss Susan Miller, Chief Accountant, and 15 other related individuals. All access to databases, bank accounts, and building keycards was blocked 15 minutes ago. Simultaneously, all active contracts with 6 partner shell companies, showing signs of inefficiency, are frozen pending investigation by the relevant authorities. Every word from Arthur struck the heads of those in the room like a hammer. Catherine's face changed from crimson to deathly pale. Her legs trembled. She couldn't stand straight and clung to the armrest of her chair. Her brothers and nephews started to panic. Some grabbed their phones, others opened their laptops, but it was all in vain. Bright red "access denied" messages glowed on their screens. You dare do this to my family? You ungrateful wretch, burning bridges? Catherine pointed a finger in my face, screaming hysterically, having lost all her false aristocratic airs. I stepped closer, leaned towards her face, and pronounced each word clearly. Listen to me, Catherine. I tolerated your family for 5 years. I gave you food and shelter. That was my generosity. But you decided to plunder the Prescott estate down to the last penny. That's called corruption and theft. Security. Escort all unauthorized personnel from the building. From this day forward, if anyone with the last name Miller sets foot on company property, call the police immediately for trespassing. 6 burly security guards moved forward at once. They acted politely but with extreme firmness. They moved chairs, collected belongings, and demanded that Catherine's family head for the exit. Screams, curses, and hysterical wails echoed throughout the floor. I stood with my arms crossed, calmly watching as the herd of people who had been sucking my family's blood was driven out the door like a disturbed swarm of bees. The air from the vents touched my face, bringing a cool sense of freedom. This was only the beginning. The price they would have to pay for their bottomless greed and cruelty was still to come. A sudden summer downpour lashed New York City. The rain beat furiously against the windows of a cafe tucked away in a quiet alley in the West Village. This had once been a favorite spot for Anthony and me when we were both still young and naive, a place where we drank cheap coffee and built illusions of a happy family. I chose the farthest table, slowly stirring my unsweetened espresso, letting the bitterness burn my throat. He himself had texted me today, begging for one last meeting to apologize. Though my heart had already turned to ice, I decided to come. Not out of any lingering feelings, but to personally put a final end to this cheap drama he was trying to stage. At exactly 4:00 p.m., Anthony pushed open the door. Unlike the preening, dapper man in the designer suit at the courthouse a few days ago, he now looked pathetic. His hair was disheveled, his shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were sunken and red, as if he hadn't slept in nights. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, nervously clasping his trembling hands on the table. If the me from a year ago had seen my husband in this state, my heart would have ached with pain. I would have rushed to hold his hands, to ask what was wrong. But now, a complete stranger sat before me, a talentless actor trying to squeeze the last drops of benefit from a marriage he himself had destroyed. Eleanor, I was wrong. I was truly wrong, Anthony began in a hoarse voice. Tears welled up in his eyes. He reached for my hand, but I snatched it away sharply. My gaze pierced him like a blade. Anthony faltered, swallowed, and continued his tearful monologue. In these days since the firing, I've realized everything. That girl, Christina, she only wanted my money. The moment she saw I had nothing left, she packed her things and left for someone else. I know I'm a scoundrel. I betrayed your kindness. I disappointed your father. But, Eleanor, we were husband and wife for 5 years. I'm begging you, talk to your father. Give me a chance to start over. I don't need the CEO position. I'm willing to be a simple clerk, just to stay by your side and make things right. I listened to his sobs in silence. A profoundly bitter smile played on my lips. It seemed human audacity had no limits. I opened my purse, slowly took out a voice recorder and a thin folder, and pushed them toward Anthony. Wipe your tears, Anthony. Stop the dramatics. There are no cameras here, and no one is giving you an award for your acting. My voice was even, without a hint of anger, but it made the man across from me deeply uneasy. I pressed the play button. Christina's flirtatious voice, mixed with Anthony's smug chuckle, came clearly from the small speaker. You're so clever, my darling, getting that mansion out of that idiot. Soon we'll gut that holding company and move abroad. My ex-husband's voice followed, the same voice that had once sworn eternal love to me. Don't worry, Eleanor is as dumb as a post. She's so obsessed with me, she'll believe anything I say. Her old man is completely senile. I've already secretly copied the entire database of Prescott's key clients and transferred it to our shell company. As soon as we're done with this, I'll kick her to the curb and bring you to live in a palace. The recording stopped. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the drumming of rain against the glass. Anthony's face went from red to deathly white, his lips trembling. He couldn't utter a word. The tears on his face had dried on their own. With shaking hands, he opened the folder. Inside were screenshots of his messages giving instructions for the secret transfer of commercial information and bank statements, proving he had been embezzling money from major projects. For 5 years, I went against my father's will for the love of you. I blindly believed you were a good person. I indulged you, tolerated your mother, and turned a blind eye as you dragged your relatives into the company. But in return, I received not only physical betrayal but also your ambition to steal the blood, sweat, and tears of my family. I leaned forward, enunciating every word. Do you think a few crocodile tears will wash away charges of fraud and embezzlement? A copy of this folder has already been sent to the police. The civil divorce was just the beginning. Your rightful place, and that of your family, is behind bars. Anthony staggered and shot to his feet. The chair crashed against the wall. He looked at me in a panic, having lost all semblance of a pleading wretch. The true nature of a cornered rat was now exposed. You dare to be so ruthless? Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you, call you a cruel bitch who drove her ex-husband to his grave? I calmly stood up, took the umbrella that was leaning in the corner, and tossed a $50 bill on the table for the untouched coffee. Gossip doesn't pay my bills. Let them talk, it won't kill me. But if I were to forgive vicious jackals like you, that is when I would truly commit a crime against my elderly father. Take care of yourself. From now on, my lawyers will be speaking to you. I walked out of the cafe into a white wall of rain. The icy water hit my face, but my soul felt surprisingly light and calm. The last festering tumor had been definitively removed. The autumn sun was still warm, casting brilliant rays on the spacious granite plaza in front of the main entrance of Prescott Holdings. The clock struck 8:00 a.m., the time when thousands of employees rushed to swipe their badges at the turnstiles to start their workday. It was at this moment that a chaotic crowd appeared, shattering the usual business atmosphere. At the head of the crowd was Catherine, my former mother-in-law, and behind her were dozens of relatives from the Miller family. Young and old, they were dressed in wrinkled, slovenly clothes, a stark contrast to their elegant appearance in the company offices just a few days ago. In their hands, they held red banners with screaming letters, "Prescott Holdings steals our hard work. The rich drive ordinary people into poverty. Give our family justice." Slogans from a crackling megaphone mixed with the wails and cries of women, turning the plaza in front of the business center into a veritable circus. Passers-by stopped, filming with their phones, causing a partial blockage of the street. The head of security, Leonard, rushed around the plaza, frantically requesting my permission over the radio to call the police to disperse the crowd. Sitting in my office on the top floor, I calmly watched this cheap spectacle on the security cameras. The corners of my lips twitched into a cold smile. I picked up the radio and gave a clear order. Leonard, don't call the police just yet. Open the main doors. Let Catherine's entire family into the main lobby and prepare water and hot tea for them. We will resolve this matter openly and transparently, in front of all our employees and the public. When I descended into the huge lobby, the Millers had already sprawled on the expensive leather sofas, continuing to hurl vile insults. Seeing me in my severe suit, some of the relatives fearfully recoiled, but Catherine, on the contrary, rushed towards me, pointing a finger. Ah, you vicious wretch burning bridges. Our family broke our backs for this company for years, and you divorce Anthony and throw us all out on the street without a penny. Today, I will show the whole city the true, cruel face of the Prescotts. I stood with my hands behind my back, maintaining a safe distance, allowing her to scream until her voice was hoarse. Employees had formed a dense circle around us, whispering among themselves. Some were doubtful, others frowned at the vulgarity of the crowd. When the noise subsided a little as Catherine ran out of breath, I began to speak slowly. Thanks to the microphone on my lapel, my clear voice resonated throughout the entire lobby. You say you broke your backs for the company? Excellent. Since your entire clan is gathered here today, and people are filming, I will show everyone just how grand the fruits of your labor were. I gave a signal. The huge electronic screen in the center of the lobby, normally used for presentations, lit up. Bank statements with official seals and scanned contracts appeared. I took the remote, switched slides, and explained loudly. This is a procurement contract for construction materials, signed by Mr. Samuel Miller, Catherine's own brother, and the former head of procurement. The prices are inflated by 3 times the market rate. The difference, $60 million, according to this statement, went directly to the personal account of Miss Susan Miller, Catherine's sister, the former chief accountant. The entire lobby gasped. Whispers turned into indignant shouts from the employees. Catherine's face turned a blotchy gray. Her legs began to tremble. She hastily grabbed her brother Samuel's sleeve. But Samuel himself was dripping with sweat. His face was drained of all color. I didn't stop, switching to the next slide. My voice became steel. And that's not all. Here is a list of 3 shell companies, registered to Victor Miller, Catherine's younger brother. No offices, no employees. Yet every month they regularly receive transfers for non-existent services from our corporation. The total amount that your family systematically siphoned off and stole from us over 3 years amounts to $150 million. You thought banners and hysterics would hide your crimes. You were robbing the honest labor of the thousands of people who work here. Just as the Miller relatives began to panic, trying to retreat or flee, sirens wailed outside. Several police cars screeched to a halt at the entrance. Special agents from the FBI's white-collar crime unit entered the building, folders in hand. An investigator loudly read out an order for a criminal investigation and the arrest of Samuel, Susan, and Victor on charges of large-scale embezzlement and fraud. Cold handcuffs clicked shut on the wrists of those who, just moments before, had been screaming the loudest about injustice. The crowd of relatives who had come with placards frantically dropped their props and scattered to the corners, pale with fear, not daring to make a sound. Catherine, seeing her brothers and sister being led away, rolled her eyes. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the cold granite floor, wailing and sobbing incoherently. But now, no one felt a shred of pity for her. Bottomless greed had dug a pit for her own family. The elite-gated community in Greenwich, Connecticut, where my father lived, had always been distinguished by its rare peace and quiet, far from the hustle and bustle of the city. Blooming lilac bushes concealed manicured green lawns. However, in the afternoon of that same day, this tranquility was brutally shattered. Unable to accept the arrest of her siblings and the prospect of prison for her son, Catherine resorted to the most despicable and dirty trick, manipulating her own blood. She dragged her 2 grandchildren, 10-year-old Daniel and 6-year-old Anna, to the wrought iron gates of our mansion. Under the still scorching sun, she forced the innocent children to stand outside in the sweltering heat, shoving crude cardboard signs into their hands with the inscription, "Grandpa Paul, Aunt Eleanor, please forgive our dad, save our family." Catherine sat beside them on the ground, her hair disheveled, secretly pinching the children's arms to make them cry loudly and attract the attention of the wealthy neighbors. Sitting in the living room with my father and watching this heart-wrenching scene on the security cameras, I felt my heart clench. A woman who called herself a grandmother could so cruelly use her own grandchildren as a human shield, as a tool for blackmail under the blazing sun. My father, Paul Prescott, a man who had been through the fire and water of big business, was now gripping his wooden cane until his knuckles turned white. His face was flushed with anger. He exhaled heavily, rose with difficulty, leaning on his cane, and said in a low but absolutely commanding voice, "Eleanor, open the gates. Since they have come to our doorstep, the Prescotts will not hide like cowards. Even animals protect their young. Using kids as human shields. Such cruelty cannot be forgiven." The heavy wrought iron gate slowly slid open. Neighbors had already begun to gather, pointing fingers and whispering. My father walked forward. His figure was thin but straight, like an indestructible oak. He did not look at Catherine, who was writhing on the ground in feigned sobs, but went straight to the children. He knelt down. His trembling, wrinkled hand rested on little Anna's shuddering shoulders, and then he looked directly into Daniel's eyes. "Catherine, get up at once!" My father's authoritative shout boomed like thunder on a clear day, instantly silencing everyone around. Catherine flinched, stopped wailing, and raised her swollen eyes to him. My father struck the asphalt forcefully with his cane. "Are you really willing to trample on the honor and dignity of these children for the sake of adult greed, for the sake of dirty, stolen money? You forced them to kneel to beg whom? To beg for leniency for criminals. The fate of your son and your brothers will be decided by a court of law. These children are innocent. They are not a shield for your cowardice." Catherine began to stammer, trying to save face in front of the onlookers. You are a cruel man. My grandchildren are losing their father. My family is destroyed because of your daughter's jealousy. You rich people are heartless." But before she could finish, something unexpected happened that stunned everyone, including my father and me. Daniel, the 10-year-old boy, usually quiet and withdrawn, suddenly jumped to his feet. His small face was streaked with tears and dirt, but his eyes held an incredible resilience, pain, and extreme humiliation. He looked at the neighbors with their phones, looked at the crude cardboard sign on his chest. Gathering all his resentment, Daniel ripped the string with both hands, tore off the sign, threw it on the ground, and stomped on it with his sneaker. "Grandma, I'm not holding this anymore. I'm ashamed." The boy's choked cry tore through the stuffy air. He turned, pulled his sister Anna to her feet, and removed the cardboard from her neck. Clasping his sister's hand tightly, Daniel looked at Catherine with a gaze full of immeasurable disappointment, the look of a deeply wounded child. "My teacher says if you do something wrong, you have to answer for it. Being broke isn't bad, but being a thief is. If Dad is guilty, let Dad answer for it. You told me to come and apologize for Dad, but you made us wear this and made a spectacle of us." "I won't do it, Grandma. Let's go home. I will never stand here and beg anyone ever again." With that, Daniel, holding his sister's hand firmly, strode resolutely away from the crowd. His small but proud figure cast a long shadow on the sun-drenched asphalt. Catherine froze, covered her face with her hands, and began to sob bitterly, but it was too late. Her last trump card, with which she had hoped to morally suffocate our family, had been destroyed by her own grandson, who had taught her a lesson in self-respect. My father watched the departing children, and tears of sympathy glistened in his eyes. He sighed heavily, turned, and went back into the house, leaving the woman to sit among the ruins of her own making. The evening sun cast dim rays on the spacious mansion courtyard, revealing a pathetic scene. After the children's defiant silhouettes disappeared around the corner, the curious crowd began to disperse. Only the Miller relatives remained, looking at each other in confusion. The curtain had been torn from their tragicomedy by the children themselves, exposing their complete shame. At that moment, a van screeched to a halt at the gates. Nicholas, Anthony's uncle, who had been fired that morning from his position as deputy head of the project department, had brought the rest of the clan with him. Everyone's face was flushed with anger. There was no trace of the fawning respect they had once shown Catherine. Nicholas strode up and jabbed a finger in the face of the woman sitting on the ground. His rough voice shattered the silence. "Catherine, what have you done? This morning we were all sitting peacefully at work, and then security barges in, packs our things, and throws us out like dogs. They say your little inner circle was stealing and committing fraud. What's that all about? You invited us to work, promised us mountains of gold, and now we're left without a dime. What do you have to say for yourself?" Catherine scrambled to her feet, propping herself up with her hands. Her clothes were wrinkled, and sweat and tears had smeared her makeup. She stammered, trying to maintain the last vestiges of her authority as head of the family. "Nick, calm down. It's all Eleanor. She's jealous and burning bridges. That's why she fired everyone. My own head is spinning. The police took my brothers and sister today. And you dare come here and blame me? A middle-aged woman, Anthony's aunt, twisted her lips contemptuously. Her eyes were filled with disdain. What the hell do you mean, jealousy? Stop lying. In the lobby today, they showed everyone the bank transfers on a giant screen. Tens of millions of dollars in kickbacks and phony contracts. You and your brothers ate it all yourselves. We didn't see a single penny. We were just a front for you. And now that it's all out in the open, you want us to go to jail for you? The crowd of relatives, hearing about the tens of millions, erupted in outrage. Curses flew. The false unity and sweet words of sister and brother, built solely on material gain, shattered into dust. Human nature, cornered and deprived of money, was exposed in its ugliest form. Nicholas stepped forward, grabbed Catherine by the collar of her expensive dress, and hissed through his teeth. Pay us compensation. We moved here from out of state. We were counting on these jobs to put our kids through college. Now we have a black mark on our records. Who's going to hire us? You siphoned off millions, now cough it up and pay us. Or I'll deal with you another way. Standing on the second-floor balcony, I silently watched the infighting. There wasn't a shred of pity in my heart, only bitterness at what people become when blinded by greed. They had leaned on each other to rob my family. And now that the gold mine had run dry, they were ready to tear each other's throats out. Anthony, who had arrived with them, cowered in a corner. His face was pale. His eyes darted fearfully at the aggressive aunts and uncles he had once scorned. The status he had worked so hard for had turned to ash, burning the last remnants of family ties. The chaos at the gates did not cease. Catherine's cries mingled with Nicholas's curses. I took a deep breath, straightened my blazer, and slowly descended the stairs. My father was sitting on the sofa, swirling a half-cold cup of tea. He gave a slight nod, letting me know I should do what I had to do. His eyes held absolute trust. I ordered Leonard to open the gates again and walked out directly to the frenzied crowd. My appearance made them freeze instantly. The hands clutching Catherine's clothes hastily dropped. I stood on the porch. My commanding gaze swept over the pale, frightened faces of the Miller family. I spoke in a calm, low voice, but each word carried enough weight to quell any resistance. That's enough noise. This is private property. I have every right to call the police for disturbing the peace. But given that we were once connected, I am giving you one last chance to disperse peacefully. I let my gaze slide over the terrified Anthony and addressed Nicholas. I am well aware that some of you were not involved in the corruption schemes of Catherine and her siblings. You were simply used as a smokescreen. Prescott Holdings is a place of law and justice. To everyone who did not participate in the theft, I guarantee a full month's salary and a severance package. Furthermore, the HR department will provide you with clean recommendations so you can find new jobs without a black mark on your record. I paused to let the words sink in and delivered the decisive psychological blow. But this offer is only valid for those who leave this place immediately and sever all ties with those under investigation. If anyone wants to stay here to defend Catherine and make a scene, by all means, but your cases will be forwarded to investigators tomorrow for a review of your complicity. My words acted like a bucket of ice water on their fervor, opening the only path to salvation for the drowning. Without a second thought, Nicholas hastily stepped back and waved his hands. Eleanor, Miss Prescott, if that's the case, we're calm. We're little people, we didn't know anything. It was all Catherine, she deceived us. We're leaving. Thank you for your mercy. With that, he waved his hand, and the entire crowd of relatives quickly piled into the van. No one even glanced at Catherine. The van started, let out a cloud of blue exhaust, and sped away, leaving a ghastly silence in the concrete courtyard. Catherine sat on the ground, her hair disheveled. She stared with empty eyes at the departing vehicle, and muttered something incoherent, like a madwoman who had lost her entire world. Anthony finally dared to approach and tried to help his mother up, but instead of sympathy, his voice dripped with venom. You see, Mom? This is all your fault. I told you to be more careful. You shouldn't have dragged those stupid hicks into the company. You were so greedy. And this is the result. I've lost my wife, my position. We're left with nothing. You've ruined my life, do you understand? Catherine was stunned. Her bloodshot eyes stared at the beloved son she had been so proud of. The pent-up resentment erupted. She shoved him hard in the chest, pushing him back. Her face twisted with pure rage. You ungrateful bastard! Who do you think I did all this for? Wasn't it to get you seed money, so you could support your little tramp? And now you're blaming it all on your mother. Catherine sobbed hysterically. Her scream, full of pain, echoed in the evening twilight, closing the curtain on this tragicomedy of people who had slept in the same bed, but had rotted from within and torn each other to pieces. The collapse of the Miller family happened with lightning speed, like a rotten old tree crumbling at the slightest breeze. The next morning, as I was sitting in my office reviewing a backlog of contracts, my phone rang. The screen displayed the name of Michael, the corporation's chief legal counsel. His voice was calm but carried shocking news. "Miss Prescott, last night Anthony secretly entered the company offices. He used a backup keycard we hadn't had a chance to deactivate and attempted to steal a hard drive containing our key client database. Security caught him red-handed and handed him over to the police. The elements of the crime for theft of trade secrets are all there." I dropped my pen on the desk, leaned back in my leather chair, and exhaled heavily. He still couldn't accept defeat, continuing to flounder in the dirty swamp he had created. Greed had completely clouded the mind of a man with a college education. He never understood. What is not earned through honest labor cannot be kept. Anthony would most likely have to spend the second half of his life behind bars, repenting his treachery. But the family's story didn't end there. In the afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. On the other end was the trembling, fawning voice of John Miller, Anthony's father. Unlike the loud and brazen Catherine, John was a retired elementary school teacher. He had lived a quiet life, prided himself on his intellectual status, and guarded his reputation. From the very beginning of the scandal, he had completely disappeared, making no attempt to reason with his wife or defend his son. He had chosen cowardly escape. "Eleanor, this is John Miller. I'm calling to apologize to you and Paul." His voice was laced with shame. "I taught other people's children my whole life, and never expected to raise such a son or marry such a greedy woman. I'm calling to tell you. This morning, I officially filed for divorce from Catherine. I also asked the court to divide our house in the suburbs, so it won't be confiscated. From now on, I have no connection to her or her son. I beg you, I don't report this to my old school. Let me keep at least a shred of dignity in my old age." Listening to these pathetic excuses, I felt a sense of bitterness, not for him, but for how warped their concept of family was. When there was money and luxury, they all enjoyed the benefits together. But when trouble came, the man who was nominally the head of the family cowardly shed all responsibility, filing for divorce just to save his pension and his miserable reputation. A family without a moral foundation is doomed to collapse. It was only a matter of time. I answered him softly but firmly. "John, the law is fair. Everyone is responsible for their own actions. The authorities will not touch an innocent person. I only hope that after all this, you find true peace in your soul, not a false sense of calm at the cost of disowning your own wife and son." I hung up, permanently closing the chapter on any relationship with that family name. The weekend greeted us with a clear, cool morning. Today, I drove myself in the old silver Jeep Grand Wagoneer, the same car my mother used to drive to our country house. My father and I were on our way to the cemetery in the pine forest outside the city. The winding road snaked through dark green pines. The wind slipped through the slightly open window, bringing the sharp scent of pine needles and morning dew. It had been a long time since my father and I had driven like this. Just the two of us, in such peaceful silence. My father wore a simple gray shirt. His face was etched with deep wrinkles, left by time and the harsh business of the 90s. But his eyes today shone with a remarkable kindness and calm. We parked the car at the foot of a hill and, carrying flowers, slowly approached the gate. My mother's grave rested quietly in the shade of an old pine tree. The name Natalie Prescott was clearly carved on the granite headstone. My father took a handkerchief from his pocket and lovingly, meticulously wiped a few dry pine needles from the cold stone. His old hands trembled, but they held a love that had never cooled. I laid down the carnations and lit a small memorial candle. The thin wisp of smoke drifted upward, carrying away all the anxieties of the storms we had endured. "Mom, your daughter has come to you," I whispered. "I've cast off this burden. The company is safe, and I've found myself again." A hot tear rolled down my cheek, but it was not a tear of weakness. It was a tear of liberation. My father stood beside me and placed a hand on my shoulder. His low, warm voice sounded amidst the silent nature. "Eleanor, have you ever blamed me? For knowing what kind of family Anthony had but letting you marry him? For leaving you to struggle in pain for 5 whole years?" I looked at my father, shook my head, and hugged him tightly. "No, Dad, I don't blame you. Thanks to your silence and patience, I learned to see people for who they are. I understood the high price one pays for blind naivety. If you had forbidden me outright or come to my rescue too soon, I would have remained a sheltered child in rose-colored glasses for the rest of my life. I would never have had the character to take over our corporation. My father smiled. It was the kind smile of a man who had dedicated the rest of his life to teaching his daughter the most important, hard-won lesson. For an eaglet to spread its wings, it must break through the hard shell itself. In this life, a person only truly grows up after going through the most painful falls. From now on, the past is closed. The path ahead belongs to you. Walk with your head held high and live fearlessly, my daughter. The wind rustled in the pine crowns, as if nature itself and my mother's soul from the heavens were comforting and blessing the two of us.